All right, welcome into Notre Dame postgame show here on the Voice of College Football. We're here with you every week, barring barring weddings or anything sort of that. But Ben, I don't think I should. Sorry, let me introduce myself. My name is Nathan Urbach. I'm one of your hosts here for the Notre Dame postgame show at the Voice of College Football every week for you guys. You can find me on Twitter at Nathan_Bach. Please follow my podcast at Golden Homers. I'm joined by my co-host Ben Belden. Same thing. He's here with me every week, like I mentioned, unless we have a wedding or something like that going on. I got those things going on in my life as well. Ben's probably going to have to do a few solo dolos here coming up as too. So, and you can find him at the Under the Dome podcast. And Ben, let him know where you can find you on Twitter real quick.
Yeah, if you're looking for me anywhere on the interweb, the easiest place is I say that facetiously, by the way, the interweb. But find me on Twitter at RealBBelden, BELDEN is that last name, and you can find all of my stuff by clicking on something on my profile.
Perfect. And like I said, guys, welcome back. Like I said, this is the Notre Dame post-game show. Notre Dame just came off a thrilling win against Virginia Tech. I say thrilling, but in reality, I think almost every Notre Dame game has been thrilling this year. Maybe besides last week, when at least at the very end, like there was the kneel down, and it was you just knew who won in those final minute and a half, whatever it was. But outside of that, I mean, maybe the Wisconsin game as well, with the crazy fourth quarter. But outside of those two games, it's been one score. It's been comeback victories, game-winning field goals. And it's been a wild ride. I think we have a lot to digest tonight, and I think you can tell that I have a lot more energy than maybe I've had in our past post game podcasts or post game shows, and I think there's a reason behind that. But again, a lot to digest tonight, Ben. And I think me and you kind of were talking on the side about maybe one of the things I think we're going to get into yesterday actually. Regarding the Notre Dame QB situation, and I think it's an interesting one to say the least.
Sorry, I lost you for a second there.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think you started talking about the quarterback situation, and I don't know, like. You mentioned having some energy. I respect that. I get that. I understand why. It's nice to see, Tyler Buchner come in and do something that was pretty exciting and I don't know, show glimpses of what the future at quarterback is for Notre Dame. I got to be honest, I am exhausted. Like I'm spent in terms of just like trying to just rack my brain or wrap my mind, I guess, around what in the heck is going on at Notre Dame with the quarterback situation, with everything. And, I've got my theories, I guess, like you mentioned, you and I kind of talked about this, yesterday, today, about the quarterback situation and what I sort of think is going on there. I don't really know. I don't really know. I think just to sort of keep it short, and we can kind of talk about this, a little bit more, I suppose, but to sort of just summarize my thoughts to start it off. I think it's pretty obvious that Notre Dame views Tyler Buchner as like the one guy in that room that's going to be the game changer. Provided they don't bring in a transfer like you and I kind of have been talking about. And I say you and I mean, that was mostly you with that kind of, and I think the point, I mean, maybe since they brought in Jack Cohn as the way that like Oklahoma has been able to bring in transfer quarterbacks and have a lot of great success in the past. But, I think it's pretty clear that, they want to do both the deep passing and, the downfield passing, I guess. I don't know, splitting hairs, I guess, calling it deep or downfield, but the downfield passing, which is why they kind of brought Jack Conan to kind of start to do that wrinkle. And then, the read option, the RPO stuff, which is going to play to Tyler Buckner's strength. And then eventually with Tyler Buckner, he can layer in some of that downfield stuff. I mean, at the very least, I think tonight kind of shows you that, Buckner's the future. They don't really feel like Drew Pine is, I mean, I think it's kind of funny that people are on Twitter using Drew Pine is Ian Book as an insult. I don't know. And I saw more than one person doing that. I mean, I get that they don't want to just rely on some of the things that they relied on with Ian Book, with Drew Pine this year. And that's why, Cohn seems to get the nod. And then Buckner obviously comes in as the kind of the number 2 type guy. So I don't know. Like I'm exhausted to just really, I mean, it is 11:36 here on the East Coast. So, I mean, I'm more exhausted by just thinking my way through everything that just happened. And I don't know. I really don't know.
Well, I can tell you my theory real quick. And I think I have some ground for it. I don't know if I ever actually told you this. This might be the first time you're hearing this. And then we can kind of get into the actual, the game recap a little bit here, which is, I think, what the people are here for to an extent. But so last year around this time, actually, I was hearing a lot of rumors from some pretty quality, like Notre Dame sources. I mean, not coaching staff or anything like that, but just people who, started having in with the program. And it was kind of when I was working for Irish Breakdown with Sports Illustrated. So I was able to sort of, I was able to get some info that I maybe wasn't able to get in past years. And one of the things I kept hearing was that the staff wanted Buckner to be the guy from the get-go. And then obviously COVID hits. So actually, it was probably a little bit earlier than this. It was the preseason before COVID really became a factor, and we weren't really, and it was pre Tyler Buckner's senior season getting canceled, I should say. And there was just a lot. He was already committed to Notre Dame, obviously, and there was just a lot of talk about. I mean, and he was a 5-star QB at the time. He was coming off of a record-breaking season in Southern California, and there was just a lot of kind of just random talk out there that they wanted him to be the guy as a true freshman. And while that's not necessarily crazy, I mean, you have a 5-star quarterback coming in for Notre Dame, at least under Brian Kelly, it was kind of maybe crazy to assume that. And then obviously, this was only after one season of really playing high school football. He tore his ACL his sophomore year. He comes back his junior year, lights it up against mediocre competition in Southern California at best. Transfers to a really, really good program in Helix. Reggie Bush, Alex Smith, I believe, both played there. Much better program. They play better competition, and the season gets canceled. He doesn't transfer anywhere, but whatever. And there were even some rumors that he might come in and sit a year behind Ian Book, reclassify to the 2021 class or 2020 class, whatever it is, and then take the reins from there. And so that always kind of stuck with me. But then you start thinking about it a little bit, and you're like, man, this kid only played 1 year of high school football. I mean, I don't know what he did his freshman year. I mean, whether he was on JV or he was the backup for his varsity team, I don't really know. But I know his statistics really only show his first game as a sophomore, and then his record-breaking junior season. I'm going off a little bit of a tangent here. Like I said, that has always kind of stuck with me, that the staff wanted him. And then Kelly today at halftime says the quote, "We have been trying to hold off on him." And right then and there, I was like, boom. The staff wants Buckner right now to be the guy. And I honestly think that's why they're holding back Pine to an extent. They don't want – and I don't know if I like this theory, because in my opinion, if you think Pine is better than Cohen, I don't know if they do or not. I mean, they keep playing Cohen, so it's hard to actually verify that. But if you do think Pine is better than Cohen right now, then he should be your guy if you're not going to play Buckner. And you shouldn't worry about next year whether or not you're going to have a QB battle, because you're going to let the best guy win that battle anyway. And if it's going to be Buckner, it's going to be Buckner, or it's going to be Pine, and maybe that turns into another Ian Book story, and maybe he's the new winningest QB of all time to whatever it is. So that whole idea of Pine not being able to start or whatever, I really don't know where to go with that. But I think the quarterback situation became a lot more clear today at halftime specifically. It wasn't just a wrinkle that they were throwing in with Buckner, at least today. And I think when he finally made a few plays with his arm to show the coaching staff that he could do that, it was like, all right, here we go. This is the guy. We're probably not going to make the college football playoff this year with already one loss, even if we go undefeated the rest of the way. Let's get the guy we want in there rolling and see where it goes from there. And I think barring a significant injury to his ankle, today, I think he's starting next week. Those are my actual thoughts from Kelly's. I don't know, just from what Kelly said, I guess.
Yeah. And to your point, I think that, and this kind of is maybe like a combination of middle ground or a synopsis of the types of things that you and I are both saying in regards to Buckner. Maybe Jack Cohn really wasn't on the radar until Tyler Buckner gets his whole senior season canceled. Maybe that's oh boy, like we can't come in here and play a true freshman that hasn't played since his junior year of high school. So let's go ahead and we'll bring in Jack Cohn real quick as the kind of holdover. And so that kind of, sort of speaks to that as well. And I think, like I say, there's some truth to probably a little bit of all of, what you've heard. And, for me, it's just kind of reading the tea leaves. It's just that they've always, thought Buckner was going to be the guy. They want to layer the offense and what the offense is going to do. And they wanted to have a reliable guy to throw the ball to the Kevin Austins and some of the young receivers and things that they have coming in as well. So yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying there.
And I think you hit the nail on the head with Jack Cohn. The reason they brought him in was partly because of Tyler Buckner's season, but I think also partly because Brendan Clark's injury. We probably wouldn't be talking about this as much, the QB situation in general, if Brendan Clark just maybe started the season. He was supposed to be the guy behind Ian Book, has a serious leg injury, might not ever play football again, to be quite honest. And, instead of Cohn, it would be Brendan Clark, Pine, and Buckner. And maybe we're talking about the same stuff. Maybe Clark's getting his job taken away from Pine or Buckner, but it'd be at least a little bit different scenario because you didn't bring in a transfer where it was like right when you brought him in, you knew he was going to start the season. So yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. If one of those two things doesn't happen, maybe Cohn's never in a Notre Dame uniform. But let's dig into the game a little bit. Notre Dame gets off to a slow start, per usual, it seems. Jack Cohn starts the first three series, doesn't do much, walks into a few sacks. I want to talk about that. I know you were high on Cohn to start the year, and you've kind of probably come off of that a little bit. But yeah, so the first three series from Notre Dame were pretty much, what we all kind of expected if Cohn was going to be the starter based on what has happened over the last, 3-4 weeks. Virginia Tech goes up 10-0. Buckner comes in, scores on his first drive, I believe, to make it 10-7, has a 3-and-out with a drop to Chris Tyree in there. And then the next drive scores another touchdown, make it 14-10. Virginia Tech goes down the field, makes it 14-13 going into halftime. And then I actually texted a few Notre Dame buddies this right after. I think that was the most comfortable halftime I've experienced this season as a Notre Dame fan. And I even said to them, I don't care if they win or lose this game. I just felt like I had some clarity. And maybe we don't have that clarity anymore now that Jack Cohn led the game-winning drive or game tying drive and then game-winning drive after that. But no, it just felt like I had some clarity there. And it was, like I said, 14-13. I felt good. I thought Notre Dame would probably come out and I don't know if they would dominate the second half, but they would certainly win the game. And then it obviously turned into a thriller. You had, a kind of a back and forth battle Tyler Buckner throws that pick six. At that point in time, before that pick six happened, I thought Notre Dame was going to probably ride to a pretty easy victory, to be quite honest with you. I thought it was going to end up being one of those games where maybe finished instead of 32-29, maybe 32 to whatever the score was at the time, 32-16, and it would look pretty good. But like I said, Buckner throws the pick six, then neither team can throw the football. Buckner gets hurt on kind of a weird ending to a pick where, and quite honestly, there shouldn't even have been a pick in there because there was a horrible clipping call by the referee right before that. And then, rest is history. Virginia Tech goes and scores on a weird 3rd and 15 run by Bergmeister. And I know I'm kind of rambling here. Give all the credit in the world to that kid. I mean, he played his heart out. He was hurt. Played a really, really gutsy game just in general. And then obviously 29-29 or 29-21, Cone leads the Notre Dame offense down the field with quite ease, I might add. Kevin Austin makes a terrific catch on the 2-point conversion to make it 29-29. Marcus Freeman makes some money with his defense holding, and then Notre Dame kicks a game-winning field goal. And I don't want to necessarily say I was surprised, or I wasn't surprised by Dorr making it, because I never want to leave the game in the especially in college. I don't want to leave the game in the field goal kicker's or in the kicker's hands. But Dorr does tend to make some clutch field goals. He did it against Florida State. He's done it in his career at Notre Dame. He's had some weird misses here and there, and he's had some bad games just in general. But when the lights are on and the game's about to end, you can pretty much count on him to, I think, to make that kick on most occasions. And I 100% agree with Styles. I do need to take a breath.
To kind of touch on a couple things that you hit on, when first of all, actually, I'm going to save this for the next for the last point. I'll end with Jack Cone. When this game got to 29-21, I was with you. Whenever we were up 21-16, I'm sort of thinking, okay, let's go. At the very least, go get a field goal here, go up 8, and if we do that, I feel pretty good about where our defense is at. In terms of not letting them in the end zone, and also then a 2-point conversion, and then we'll probably score again anyway and win this game something like 27-22, whatever the heck it was. And I love the question that we have on the screen right now. How many points are 2 strokes worth? I feel like I had quite a few strokes during this game. And then when it got to 29-21. Truly, I thought, and I don't do this very often. I really don't. I really thought for a hot second, like, oh my goodness, like Notre Dame's not winning this. like this is not good. There's a slim to none chance that we're going down there, getting the touchdown and the 2-point conversion. And as they're setting up for the 2-point conversion, then I'm thinking to myself, all right, I'm going to know right away they're scoring on this 2-point conversion. Like, I'm going to see the guy break open, and because it's coming out quick. And of course, when it doesn't come out quick, I just basically like lean back on the couch and just think, oh boy. And somehow, some way, Jack Cone, for the first time all year, buys some extra time like I said, the first time in his life, maybe. Like, who the heck knows? And just lofts it up. I don't even think it was intended for Kevin Austin, to be honest with you. And Austin comes down with it. I think most Notre Dame fans pretty well see the same thing there, that it wasn't actually his intended receiver, but luck of the Irish, I guess. And the last thing, like I said, I was going to end with my I guess opinions or my feeling about Jack Cone. Like, dude, okay, we're what are we now? Is this game 6? Was this game 6? Yeah. So we're 5-1. All right. This is 6 games in, and you finally figured out how to just get the ball out of your hand quicker. Like, one of the very first plays, he threw that play when he returned. He threw the pass to Kyron Williams, where it was the targeting, and they pick up 15 yards on that. And I think the very next play, he gets it, looks, sees like that Josh Lugg or somebody on the right side of the line is just beat, and just rifles it out of bounds. I was like, thank you. Like, I've been waiting for you to do that all year. Like, If you'd have been doing this all year, we wouldn't have been in so many 2nd and 15, 3rd and 15 weird situations where now the defense can just tee off. And it's like, where has this been? I don't quite understand some of it. I mean, I know that a receiver's not going to break open early on every single play, but you mentioned it earlier. There was at least one sack that I can remember that he has a clean pocket and he just climbs the pocket right into the arms of a blocked defensive tackle. It's like, what are you doing? So I don't know. Like it's just, I'm glad he did it. I'm glad he put that touchdown drive together. I'm glad he then also, was a large part of the field goal drive that got put together as well, obviously. But like, it's frustrating. It's bittersweet, I guess, is the best way to put it. It's like, could this have been happening the whole time? And then we really could be just layering in Tyler Buckner, who made some freshman level mistakes. Could we be layering him in a little bit more than we are, rather than throwing him to the wolves in the second quarter down 10? I mean, I don't know. I don't. Could we have avoided an ugly loss to Cincinnati? I mean, holy Moses. So I don't know. Like at the end of the day, I keep saying it. Maybe this. Maybe what we learn, maybe what we appreciate about this football season is how far they end up coming from the beginning to the end, because you see things even against Cincinnati, and Cincinnati maybe is the exception, but every game you sort of see something that you like, that you're like, oh yeah, I like that, but then it's just negated by just terrible mistakes and that. I don't know. So there's a lot to pick apart here. I don't necessarily know that I have all the answers. Everybody wants to talk about who's the quarterback going to be after the bye week. And to that, sort of my answer is like, I don't care right now. I don't care. Like, we limped to the bye week to 5-1. You're starting to find out some things about Cohn, about Buckner. Apparently Pine is not part of the future. And I mean, I guess if that's the decision you're making, make that decision and move forward. But wow, like what a weird season, what a weird game, and everything's just weird. That's the best way I can put it.
Yeah, and kind of to your point, I put this Stylites response here on the board. I kind of agree. I was going to mention that, and then he mentioned it as well. So I mean, it's kind of easy to point out here. And also, before I even continue with that, kudos to the offensive line, I think, in general. I mean, once they moved to Buckner, after that third drive, I mean, I know he can run the football. You do some different things to help your offensive line in that sense. But once that happened, I think the offensive line kind of got a spark. And the few times where maybe they did get beat, Buckner, just with his athleticism, is able to kind of make some plays. But then you get to the 2-minute offense with Cohn, and the offensive line is maybe playing with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. They've played actually probably a pretty good game overall, or at least they feel like they had. And you're almost forced to get the ball out quickly. And that's where a guy with the experience of Cohn, I think, kind of it comes in handy in that instance, is that he knows he has to get the ball out quick. I'm sure Pine would have got the ball out quick regardless. I mean, I think he just gets the ball out quick in general. Whenever I've watched him play this year, he just has a little bit more twitchiness, I should say, in almost everything he does. I mean, he's pretty much just a better Cohen that's shorter, I guess. Yeah, and I mean, the 2-minute drill, I mean, I hate to say it because it kind of limits what you run to an extent, but the 2-minute drill, I think, really is maybe the best thing for Cohn. Or you just got to make sure you're getting the ball out quick in general for your playmakers. And that leads me to a point that, and I don't think Notre Dame's getting enough credit for this, but they were without their best player on offense today in Michael Mayer, and still were able to put 32 points on the board, come out, able to pull out a victory on the road. And then they were without maybe their third or fourth best weapon in Chris Tyree pretty much half the game. Don't know exactly what that injury is. I'm not sure if Kelly has touched on that yet in his post-game presser, but but he was clearly hobbled. He wasn't in on kickoff returns. He wasn't in on punt returns. So unless he got benched for whatever reason, he was hurt, and that was a big deal as well. So kudos to Notre Dame for being able to even pull off anything offensively without those two guys. Because I'll be honest, when I saw Michael Mayer not in the game, I was like, I don't know how they're going to move the football today.
Yeah. I mean, and how much easier would Tyler Buckner's life have been if he had, a security blanket like Michael Mayer? I mean, maybe neither of those two interceptions get thrown. I mean, you never know. So, yeah, that was a major thing. I had a point about Jack Cohn that I wanted to make, and of course, as soon as I started talking, I lost it because I wanted to hit Uncle Mayer. But I don't know. To your point, then I guess okay. So here's what it was. Sorry about this. Like I say, it's approaching midnight on the East Coast, so I've been up for quite a while today. So cut me some slack, I guess. But I think I think that your point about it looks like the offense line, probably played their best game of the season. I mean, the bar wasn't very high, let's be honest. I mean, and I don't mean that as to be real snarky. I mean, I'm just saying that, you've seen it pretty much every game. I mean, there's a little bit of improvement here and there, but then, there's the one play that's just terrible. And it didn't really seem like all night that they really had just, a whole ton of off schedule plays. Tonight, it sort of seemed like what hampered the offense a little bit was, Buckner with a little bit of inaccuracy on third downs. At one point, they flashed the graphic that he was like 0 of 4 and an interception on third down. And I think that was just prior to his second interception, which also was on a 3rd and long. Some of the off schedule was, blindside block, a clipping call that just whatever. I don't know. But to circle back to the point about the offensive line looking the best, I think that's twofold. I think one, Buckner can obviously make up for some deficiencies on the offensive line a little bit. But I think the other part is, they're also able to run the ball with Buckner in a little bit, which means that, teams don't just tee off on the pass. I feel like if I'm a defensive end and I see Jack Cohn back there, I'm thinking, I can take whatever route I want to get to Jack Cohn because, he's not running. I don't have to stay and contain. I don't have to not over pursue because if he runs, he's getting a yard or two, so I can rush with a little bit more reckless and not have to worry about that so much. Whereas if Buckner's back there, and I think Drew Pine has an element of this as well, if I get out of my lane, I'm going to leave a nice running lane for one of those guys to take advantage of. So I think that's, an added layer to it too. Which is exactly why I wanted Drew Pine to start this football game. And who knows, we don't have to sit and talk about, I know we're on, 28 minutes and counting here of this. And we've really only talked about the quarterback, offensive line mostly. But, I think that, I still don't understand certain things, and I still don't understand why. I wonder what would have happened in this game if Pine would have started. Would we have seen Buckner at all? I have my doubts. And so to maybe that extent, Cohn starting the game, maybe that's the best thing. And maybe the best take I saw, and I'll stop my ramble rant with this, is that,
take a breath.
I need to. But maybe the best thing that, maybe Brian Kelly hoodwinked into thinking, well, it's obvious that Drew Pine's going to start. I'm going to throw Jack Cohn out there for 2 or 3 series and let the newness of the game and things wear off a little bit, the game to slow down just a bit and be less frantic at the beginning. And then I'm going to Buckner almost regardless of what happens. So we're just kind of avoiding the disaster at the beginning of the game, and then we're going to turn it over. Maybe that was the plan all along. It sort of felt like that might be at least a little bit of the thought. Like I say, I don't know to the full extent to which that's true, but wouldn't surprise me if that was kind of part of the thought process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and real quick, I'll touch on this and then we'll kind of move on just because we need to we need to probably touch on some other things. Those first two, I think it was the first drive from Cone. He walked into a sack just immediately on the second play of the game, and just went down. And he had a pocket, but I think I mean, maybe you can couple it with the O line being bad for him, and so he just kind of gets, rambled a little bit. And then the next play, and it might have been, I might have the two plays reversed, but I think it was the first play. He walks into the sack immediately, and then the second play he rolls out when he didn't need to roll out, and so he immediately throws the ball away. And you're like, okay, well, this series is over. Like what? Like all you had to do is stay in the pocket, and then you're fine. And maybe that was designed, but the way he did it did not feel like it was designed. And it just felt like it was just like, what are we doing here? And that can't be the offense that we're running. And I don't even necessarily blame Tommy Rees for it. It was, I think he's been hampered by the QB play to an extent. And I feel like when Buckner came in, the offense, whether or not Buckner's ready to let loose on everything, and I think he showed today he's not necessarily ready for everything, and he's going to make some freshman mistakes. It's going to happen. You're going to you're going to have some growing pains there, but he can open up the offense just in general. I think Tommy Rees thinks he can run so much more. I mean, there were a couple plays in there that Notre Dame didn't even do with Ian Book, where you do the read option, you have a running back going one way. I think it was the Kyron Williams touchdown specifically. And you had Kyron, he hands the ball off to Kyron. Kyron ends up having to make a great play to score just in general. But Kyron Williams, great football player, he's going to do that. But if he pulls that, I think Tyler Buckner probably has a touchdown going the other way, or Logan Diggs is wide open in the flat because they had the two running backs right next to each other. And Logan Diggs, if he just flips it to him, it's a touchdown as well. And those are plays you can't run with Cone, because if Cone's pulling the ball and either keeping it on a sack, keeping it for a 2-yard gain, or throwing the football every single time, he's never not, or either that or he's handing out. He's never actually, I think there was a stat going into this game, and I think it proved to be the same way, because he never pulled and ran with it himself. But on every single RPO that Notre Dame has run this year with Cone has gone to the running back. Or either that or it's just been a normal play action where there's no threat of the run from the quarterback. And then that's not really a true RPO. A true RPO is what I just described, in my opinion at least, with Buckner, where you have options pretty much everywhere on the football field. But I think we've talked a little bit too much about that. Real quick, I just threw this on the screen. It's been on here for a couple minutes now. But if you like what you guys are seeing, like I said, me and Ben are here every week after every Notre Dame postgame show. Drew here looks like he's a newcomer. We appreciate your listen. But again, if you like what you're seeing, make sure you hit that like button. The Voice of College Football. You can find the Notre Dame channel there. You can also Venmo Mark Rogers TV if you really like what you're seeing. Throw us a super chat. It helps. Not only helps Mark, but it helps myself and it helps Ben. And we would love to have you guys here every week, and we even jump on with Mark, sometimes pregame, a couple days out and stuff like that. So, like I said, if you're liking what you're seeing, make sure you're giving us a follow. And make sure you're supporting Mark Rogers TV specifically at the Voice of College Football. But Ben, I wanted to get into a little bit of the defense today. I think it was maybe their worst performance overall from from start to finish. Not necessarily the big plays, because I think that was and that's kind of the reason why I say it was their worst performance, because I think most of the other games, like Florida State, Toledo, so on, it was really just that big play that kind of hit him, and that was the reason they, those teams were able to put up some points. But today, I just think from start to finish, Virginia Tech was able to do things that Notre Dame doesn't typically allow. They didn't get off the field on third down specifically. They pretty much had everybody back. I mean, Kurt Hinish was playing today. They didn't really seem hampered, defensively from that standpoint. But I don't know. It was an interesting game, I think, from the defense. And I don't know, maybe it just felt early on that they just didn't have that edge to them that they typically have, and I think that played a role. They made a few plays here and there with the Bracey interception that I think got them rolling at one point, and I think that was at the point in time where me and you sort of both agreed on this earlier that was we thought Notre Dame would pull ahead and win the game. But in general, I mean, I thought this was just kind of like a mediocre showing from the defense, and I expect bigger and better things moving forward.
Yeah, I think there were a couple interesting things from the defense or the game in general. I mean, one of the most interesting things about this particular game, I think, is that Notre Dame offensively was 3 of 12 on third down. Virginia Tech was 8 of 17 on third down, and somehow Notre Dame finds a way to win the game. I mean, usually, one of the old sayings about football is, the game's won or lost on third down, and Notre Dame lost third down decisively on both sides of the football and still found a way to win, which is just almost beyond me to a certain degree. But sticking with the defense, kind of like you said, just sort of seemed like they were – I don't know. I don't want to say they were a step slow because I don't think they looked slow, but similar to, it looked a little bit Florida State-ish at times with some sloppy tackling. There were a couple blitzes where it looked, at first glance like, oh, Notre Dame's getting home on this one. And they just didn't finish the play, and it either ends up in the throwaway or how many times on third down was Burkmeister or Burke, did I say it right? I don't even know. Gonna escape, contain, and run for yardage. I should put some more respect on that kid's name by actually saying his name correctly. I need to maybe look that up. Burkmeister. All right. Yeah, I second guessed myself. Yeah, I knew it was Burkmeister, but for some reason when I said it, it didn't sound right. So, but anyway. And then, the play that, where Kyle Hamilton gets called for roughing the passer, that's not roughing the passer, but that was a great dialed up blitz. You feel like 90% of the time, at the very least, that's an inaccurate throw, especially by a guy that was playing with one arm at the time, it felt like. And somehow he, give him credit. He stepped in there, delivered that pass, and the Virginia Tech receiver made a big catch. It just felt like that was the tune all night, that Notre Dame was just real close to being there and just didn't play a whole awful lot. I don't know. I mean, the defense is called upon a lot, I feel like. Had to play really well at the beginning of the game to keep it close. I mean, I don't want to say that, I really don't want to say that, a whole lot of this is on the defense because they're putting in a bad situation even before the game even starts, knowing the struggles that the offense has gone through. So, I think you're right. I don't think it was the most crisp performance from the defense. However, clearly they played well enough to win the game. And finally the offense bailed out the defense a little bit. And that's maybe the best thing about this game.
Yeah, I guess in reality, they gave up 22 points, and most of the time you give up 22 points, you're going to win the football game, regardless of, for Notre Dame's sake, regardless of how bad their offense has been in general this year. They're going to win most games when they give up 22. So yeah, no, I completely agree. Obviously, I think the biggest deal was really just the getting off the field on third down. I know that there's one play specifically. I think it led to, I don't know if it led to points, I forget. But you had the Cam Hart with didn't want to wrap up. He's going for the big hit, maybe, I don't know, or maybe he was trying to hold off and not, commit targeting or something like that, because that's just a huge thing, which we can get into that real quick right after this. Because I do want to get into the refs a little bit. I thought it was a very poorly officiated game. I'm not usually one to say that that's, how you're going to win or lose. But I will say for a second, I thought Notre Dame was going to lose that game, and I was going to put maybe 15 to 20% of that on the referees. But no, Cam Hart, if he wraps up there, Notre Dame's off the field. Again, I forget what the score was at that specific time, but obviously huge momentum there for Virginia Tech in that regard. And then, like you mentioned, the Kyle Hamilton. I mean, I think he ended up completing that pass even off of the, even with the 15-yard penalty by Hamilton on that play. And that was a gutsy play by him. But that another one where, maybe you just need to be a little bit more stingy as a corner. And don't play so much off coverage. I mean, that could be a coaching thing as well. But yeah, no, just like like I mentioned, I wasn't like upset with the defense per se. I mean, I know when Notre Dame tied the game at 29, like I was pretty confident that the defense would get off the field. Specifically because Burkmeister I didn't think he was going to be able to lead Virginia Tech with one arm essentially down the field. I thought they would fix some of the things there and not let him run. He almost got that first down before they punted, but again, you got to get 10 yards for a reason, right? But yeah, no, I mean, overall, I'm not worried about the defense. I just thought it was kind of an interesting showing from them. I do want to get into some of these some of the ref issues, and then right after that, I think we probably need to get back to the quarterback position overall. We have a lot of comments coming in on who should be starting, and I think both of us have our maybe differing opinions. I don't know, and one of my biggest things there is I think there's a possibility at least that with the bye week there were maybe some things there with the coaching staff that they were already planning on. And they sort of lucked out this week by maybe getting a sneak preview of Buckner and winning the game, because of it to an extent. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about some of the calls. Two things I really want to mention is I thought Notre Dame got hit out of bounds at least twice that I can remember with no calls. One of them was on the offensive targeting call, which I've never seen in my life, especially considering that running backs lower their head almost every time they can and never get called for targeting. And then somehow one of Notre Dame's backup tight ends, Mitchell Evans, gets called for targeting on a blindside block where the player was looking directly at him. So I thought it was a completely legal block. And then not only that, I don't think he hit him a little high, I guess, but he in no way hit him with his helmet. And the guy seemed to be falling a little bit when it happened because he was getting blocked by another guy. So that was very interesting. I mean, luckily enough, it wasn't Michael Mayer blocking there. He happened to be out for obviously out for the game anyway. But if that was Michael Mayer in that situation, I think Notre Dame fans would have lost their shit. But yeah, so that was an interesting call. You already mentioned the Kyle Hamilton one. I'm pretty sure he hit him almost simultaneously when he threw the ball, or just one of those things like, what do you want the defensive player to do? And then, like I mentioned, or the next two things, I mentioned one of them, the two out of bounds plays. One of them was on the play that Mitchell Evans was ejected for. Kyron Williams got hit out of bounds late, and then there was another play where Logan Diggs got hit out of bounds late, and there was a no call as well. And I just, it's right in front of the referee. I just think those are just super simple calls to make overall. And then I saw a few holding calls not there. And the only reason that bothers me to an extent is I think that Notre Dame's defensive line is their strength. And when they're not getting those calls and I see teams converting on third down or, converting on big plays and a holding call is not there. I mean, I think the Burkmeister touchdown to go up 29-21 essentially is actually a really good example. I mean, I think it was either MTA or Justin Amaloa that was a clear hold on that play. And I just don't think that defensive line specifically gets enough credit by the refs, not necessarily by the fans, not necessarily by the opposing teams, and not necessarily by maybe opposing fans, because I think people know that that's the strength of their team. But I think when we as fans see it on almost every drive and it's never called, that's an issue for me. And I think it's almost a disservice to the defensive line and Notre Dame's defense in general.
Yeah, I can't really add a whole ton to what you said because I really just agree with everything. I mean, what I will say is, how Kyron Williams doesn't get that call right after the targeting call, I don't know. I have no idea. That clip that I know
The
I
clip.
mentioned
They didn't even
earlier,
mention the clip. That was horrible.
yeah, that's a terrible call. I mean, that's boy.
I don't even think he
So that
touched the guy.
Not really. I mean, he's getting blocked himself, and he kind of fell down and took a swipe at the guy, sort of, to try to at least, I don't know. And the guy falls over, and it's like that's not a clip. Like I don't know. Like, first of all, I haven't seen clipping called in a game since I feel like I was in middle school, and then there it was. And what makes me so mad about that is that takes Notre Dame out of, I think that was a third down play, 3rd and 7 or 8, and then next thing you know, it's 3rd and 23, and it's a whole lot more obvious what Notre Dame's going to do. And then that's when Tyler Buckner throws the interception, and that could have really changed the game. I mean, it did change the game, to be honest with you, but I mean, it really could have changed the outcome of the game, I guess is what I should say. The last thing about what you're spot on about the holding calls. And then the last thing I guess I'll say, in maybe defense of the refs, on the Logan Diggs play, he steps out of bounds, but he does sort of keep running, But what I'll say is that Notre Dame was victimized by the same exact stinking thing against Wisconsin, I think it was 2 weeks ago, where a guy runs out of bounds, but he hurdles, and the Notre Dame player still thinks he's in bounds, hits him. There's a 15-yard penalty. So, I can see that not being called in that play, but Notre Dame's been victim to that. So that's what makes me mad about that particular one. I don't know. I've had this theory, I guess, that this whole season I've been saying it, not necessarily, I don't know. I yell it at my TV more than I say it behind a microphone, but like, Notre Dame gets homered, especially at home. I mean, I know this game was a road game, but like, I feel like Notre Dame gets homered at home more than any team in college football. Like, they get no calls at home, none whatsoever. I don't know. Like, I don't know if I buy this or not. I'd like to think that a ref is generally just trying to do their best job. If they miss a call, it's just because they're bad. It's not because they're biased. But
Right.
I mean, you almost have to wonder, like, is there a little bit of Notre Dame, like, you need to join a conference that goes on? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, who the heck knows? Like I say, I prefer to think along the lines of a ref just misses a call, because honestly, there was a play or two where I thought Notre Dame was going to get called for holding and they didn't. So I don't know. I'll leave the officials alone now, but I think I got off. I love on a little bit of a tangent there, but I don't know. At least the refs didn't cost us a game this one. We can just leave it there, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think overall, I think refs do their best. I don't know if this is a relative of yours, by the way, but no, I think the refs do their best. I don't know. This one specifically just kind of stuck with me from a officiating standpoint, because I did think there was a point in time there where I was like, man, Notre Dame might lose this game, and it might partly have to do with the refs. I mean, like I said, I think in general, when you lose a game, that tends to be an excuse by fans. So I try not to get caught up in that. I mean, because in reality, when you do lose, you probably deserve it overall, or you just didn't play your best football, whatever it is. Against Cincinnati, I think that's actually a really good example there. I think there were a few calls specifically where I was like, man, like Notre Dame kind of got screwed on that by the ref. But in reality, I think Notre Dame shot themselves in the foot way too many times in that game to really have that be a discussion. And one of the reasons I brought this up was, I think it wasn't last week against Cincinnati, but then you have the or maybe it was. I forget if it was against Cincinnati or not, but you had the Kyle Hamilton made it public that a ref told him that because he's an All-American, he doesn't have to get a call. And my response to that, at least on Twitter last week, was, don't you think an All-American deserves that call more? Because there's a reason there's an All-American, and the kid and he clearly can't get blocked. And so if it's guys that the offensive line or whoever are going to dominate players that aren't as good as them. That's just how football works, how every sport works. But when you have a guy like Kyle Hamilton, who's going to be a top 5 pick in the draft this coming year, he's clearly about to make a play, and the ref comes to you and says that. I mean, how do you react? If I was Kyle Hamilton, I probably would have been kicked out of the game, to be completely honest with you. I don't think I would have been able to keep my composure.
Yeah, I hope in that case that ref just didn't really see it and is just reacting to Kyle Hamilton saying, "Hey, I got held." Like, and is thinking, okay, Kyle. Like, sure, you got held. Like, who's even good enough to hold you? You know what I mean? Like, I hope that's where that was.
All American stop complaining kind of thing. I would hope that's the case as well.
Right.
And in all reality, it probably was. But in the heat of the moment in the game, I can see why that's something where Hamilton gets upset about. And then when you looked at the replay from that exact call, I mean, he was clearly held. So he did have a very legitimate argument. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. In reality, I don't think it's something to really worry about down the road. I'm not someone that complains too much about officiating overall. Thought today was certainly interesting, and it meshed well with what Kyle Hamilton said in his podcast earlier this week. Ben, before the QB talk, I thought about this when we were talking earlier, and I just forgot to bring it up. Before the season started, one of my big points on Notre Dame and Brian Kelly specifically was that they're at this point as a program that 10-2 is kind of like the floor, or at least at the very least from a fan standpoint. I think from a program standpoint, it's like the expectation. If you go less than 10-2, I think that at this point in time, it's a bad season. 9-3 into a bowl game, making it 10-3, I don't think cuts it anymore. Maybe you do that once every like 5-6 years, whatever. But I think in general, you need to go 10-2 at bare minimum. They're not Alabama that needs to go 12-0 every year, whatever. Or in this case, they lost today. So we probably should talk about that because we've had some people commenting on that. Texas A&M beat Alabama today, so that was some huge news for college football. I think the fact that they're 5-1 right now, and I think you mentioned it, or the phrasing you used was limped to 5-1, and they're going into the bye, or they limped into the bye week 5-1. I don't know if I want to give them credit for it, because I think that that's maybe doing a disservice to the play, but or maybe giving a little bit too much respect for Notre Dame and their play. But I think 5-1 is just it's very interesting to me, because I think they could very easily be, 2-3 in reality. They could have lost to Wisconsin. They could have lost to Toledo. They could have lost to Florida State. They did lose to Cincinnati. They could have lost today. So, I mean, almost every game they've played in this year, you could argue that there was at least a point in time in the game where you're like, man, they might lose. And the fact that they're 5-1, I think really goes to my point from the beginning of the season, that they're at this point where they're going to find a way to win most weeks. Might not always be the prettiest. It's going to be ugly at times. And then, like I said, this year specifically, it's been ugly a lot of the time, maybe ugly every time. But they're still 5-1, and they have a chance to go 11-1 still. And I think that when you look at the rest of their schedule, they probably should go 11-1, at least based on who, from a talent standpoint, a recruiting standpoint. They have some of their better teams still at home, with North Carolina still being a talented football team. USC, same thing, talented football team. And, so on and so forth. What are your sort of thoughts on that, and the fact that because they're 5-1, do you think that really means anything, or do you think it's just kind of that's just what it is this year?
Well, I'm glad you asked this. Yeah. I don't know. This is going to sound a little bit like me patting myself on the back, but I'll go ahead and do it, I guess. I said on my own show earlier this week that, I almost, when I started to say this sentence, I almost said, I could just see somebody listening to this and thinking I'm a moron for saying this. But, and so here I am going to say it twice. But this season, almost feels like the 2016 season to me, where there's just a lot going on. And I know in 2016 we went 4-12 or 4-8. I'm sorry. But the difference is
You're already moving on to the Browns on me.
it felt like 12. Let's put it that way. 12 total games. I was doing math in my head. Like I say, it's past midnight here. Anyway, so in a way, it sort of felt like that. A lot of frustrating things going on. But I guess where we could kind of take a step back, and the difference is that now the program's in a much healthier spot than it was in 2016 and can actually win games like this. I mean, in 2016, I believe the stat was that of those 8 losses, 7 of them were by like a touchdown or fewer, I believe.
Yeah, I think they were all like 6 or 7 points. Yep.
Right. And so, at the very least, I know that a lot of Notre Dame fans are frustrated with where we are and where the program is and that type of stuff. And I think some of that's justified, certainly. However, I would say, be thankful. Not that long ago, we were dealing with way worse. And since that time, people talk about Brian Kelly 2.0. I mean, and I think that's a legitimate thing. I mean, it was like basically every assistant coach was pretty well gone after that. It was a reinvented program, which is not easy to do. I mean, I don't know. If you've ever coached at any level, you understand how difficult it is to just completely reinvent yourself the way that Brian Kelly did. And so I think there's a lot of credit to that needs to be more credit needs to be given to Brian Kelly for that. Certainly there are things that you're going to nitpick about your coach and about your program and about all of that type of stuff. But in general, I feel pretty good about where the program is right now, because, I don't think really you nor I nor any person that has a Notre Dame podcast, whether you're an insider, a fan, whatever, nobody picked Notre Dame to be in the college football playoff this year. There were some people who were probably saying that, if a lot of things go right, yeah, Notre Dame might be able to make it to a college football playoff. But guess what? A lot of things aren't going right now. And it's not like it's Notre Dame that's the only program that's having its struggles right now. I mean, even when we thought Alabama was unbeatable, they just lost tonight to an unranked Texas A&M team. So, I mean, I don't know. I think to me, and like I say, this is really trying to take a step back and take a more 30,000 feet view of the program. I feel okay, I suppose, because I think that everyone has acknowledged what this year was going to be. And in terms of, a year where at the very least, hopefully you get to maybe like a New Year's Six bowl, because that is maybe like your floor right now, hopefully is competing for those types of bowls. And then in the years where you really ramp it up, then you're competing for a college football playoff spot, hopefully at some point, a national championship when we get there. And I don't know that Notre Dame's that far off to being able to compete for a national championship. I think the difference between, a team like last year's Notre Dame team and a team that can compete for the championship is like a dynamic quarterback playmaker. And I think we're closer to that. And if anything, there's to be frustrated with, it's that we just haven't had somebody, a Brady Quinn, a Jimmy Clausen, one of those types of quarterbacks with the help that those types of guys would have needed to win a national championship. And I'll wrap real quick this ramble by just saying shout out to my cousin Pete. I know we had his comment up on the screen here a little bit ago. Thanks for tuning in. And maybe as we wrap up, we can kind of get to some of his talk about the quarterback, because I think that's a good thing to talk about maybe going forward here.
Yeah, no, I think you explained that a little bit better. Kind of what I was really getting at was kind of like what you mentioned with the 2016 team is a few years ago this would have felt like more like a 1-5 team versus a 5-1 team, and the program is in such a healthy state right now, just in general, from a recruiting standpoint, from a player personnel standpoint, I think in general from a coaching personnel standpoint as well. and maybe even like a confidence standpoint, because they've been in 2 college football playoffs. They've hung in there with good teams. I mean, I don't think that Notre Dame, I think as a program, gets enough respect. Everybody says they get blown out whenever they play a big game. And they beat Clemson last year. I don't care if they had Trevor Lawrence or not; they beat them. I know Clemson looks, whatever they look like this year, but that's still a top-notch program. And at that point in time, they still played like a top-notch program. They've hung in there with the Georgias of the world both times they played them. And so in reality, they've been blown out a few times, but like, who doesn't get blown out against Alabama? Who doesn't get blown out against Clemson the second time around? Who, they've had, I think the games where you can kind of nitpick are the Michigans and the Miamis that they've had. I think they're past that. I'll be honest. I might get burned by that. I do think they're past that. I don't think they're going to get blown out by teams of that caliber, at least for the next several seasons, or when they get a new head coach or whatever it may be. But speaking to what you were just mentioning, I would like to transition into the quarterback talk. You did mention the idea that Notre Dame is close. I think that at least from a Notre Dame's fan standpoint, that's sort of been what we think. What we think we've been missing. I mean, obviously Ian Book was great in general, but he was maybe missing that one extra step. And we might have that. I mean, Tyler Buchner might have that. I mean, he as good as Ian Book was at running the football, Tyler Buchner's better at running the football. As good as Ian Book was as just a creative playmaker, Buchner, I think, has already shown that he can push the ball down the field better than what Ian Book was, or at least better than how Ian Book was able to. Ian Book was really only able to do that when he had playmakers like a Chase Claypool, where he's like, hey, just go up and get the ball. Today, Buchner did that. He threw it up to Kevin Austin. I mean, that's not a play you saw from Ian Book almost ever. And it was a frustrating thing, and that's why people thought Cohn could be maybe a different type of quarterback for them in that sense, that he could make plays like that, and he has shown that in spurts as well. So yeah, I mean, I think this is going to lead into, and I'll get your thoughts here first. What do you? I mean, we have a bye week coming up. I mean, what would you do? I mean, I know me and you are analysts, and obviously maybe even fans first. But I have my thoughts. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on what you would do for the rest of this season at quarterback.
I know this will be an unpopular take, but I almost think you got to approach the rest of the season the way you approach this game. I think it's Cohn and Buchner moving forward. I got to be honest. I think you've probably seen the last of Drew Pine. I just sort of feel like, if there was ever going to be a time, and I don't know that I don't know Drew Pine as a person. So, I mean, I could be way off when I say this, but if there was ever a time for a guy to be like, okay, like if I did what I did and I still don't get a shot to start a game, like I'm going to go ahead and pack up this season, and, not risk injury, and I'm going to transfer somewhere else. I mean, I don't know. And so, like I say, maybe Drew Pine is a competitor in a way that he's not going to do that, but it wouldn't surprise me if he did, frankly. I think this is the Cohn and Buchner show back and forth pretty much for the rest of the year. And the one thing that I was a lot happier with today was, Buchner was more effective running the ball, running the read option, handing it to Kyren Williams. I mean, Kyren Williams, I feel like it's sad to say this, but he got 74 yards today, which was the most we've seen him able to run for, largely because, Notre Dame was a little bit more balanced. Tyler Buchner was able to throw the ball a little bit, or it was allowed. So at the very least, and he hit the one over the top. I mean, all you got to do is hit one, and then the defense starts respecting it a little bit more. That play, by the way, like, I don't know if you saw Buckner's body length, but that throw looked so effortless for him. It was just kind of like, here we go, just quick little wrist flip, and flick of the wrist, and there it was. And then that was fun to see. I mean, so.
And it was right on the money.
and it was right on the money. It's like he didn't think about it. He didn't really try that hard, just threw it. And that was awesome. But I think coming out of the bye against USC, you try the same thing with Cone, sort of see what you get out of that. There was a comment in here, a question that's, can we be an up-tempo team all the time? I'd like to see Notre Dame do that, quite a bit more, to be honest with you. I mean, that's something that I've always thought Notre Dame was, when they're good and they're crisp in their up-tempo offense, I've thought that's when Notre Dame's offense has been more effective for the whole 12 years of the Brian Kelly era. I mean, not just in the last couple. So I would love Notre Dame to go to more of an up-tempo type of an offense. Maybe that means you wear on the defense a little bit. Maybe that means the pass rushers are a little bit slower on a third down because they don't have as much time. They're gassed, and then maybe that's when, you get them on your heels a little bit with the up-tempo offense, and you bring Buckner in real quick for a drive or two, and you maybe you don't go up-tempo as much, but you read option them to death. You slow the game just a little bit. You can play it kind of some multiple tempos. So I don't know. I think that's where you go. I think, the point of tonight was getting Buckner in a position where, he could flourish. He could do some things that we hadn't seen from him for the first couple games of the season. And you start to continue to layer those things in, because he did show some freshman things. I mean, I don't know what was going on that interception where he's trying to throw to other true freshman Deion Colsey, and one or both of them just didn't do what they were supposed to. And, whether that's supposed to be an out route, whether that's supposed to be, whether it was a misread, who made the misread, I don't know. But so there are some freshman things there that you're going to have to live with Buckner. But, I don't know. Like I say, I think you go with Cone, you sprinkle Buckner in, because you're really taking this season, and to a certain extent, even though you're still trying to win, you're playing for the future. I mean, I think it's fair to say that. And I think that's what it looks like the rest of the year. I don't know, like, talk about other things that Brian Kelly's done with the quarterback position. I mean, this is almost like Tommy Rees, Everett Golson, but maybe in reverse. It's you're using Tommy Rees as, who's obviously Jack Cone in this parallel, as more of your go-to guy, but you're sprinkling in the more athletic, higher upside type of a guy, as a little bit of sugar and spice and everything nice, and trying to bring him along for what hopefully is a really nice future at the Notre Dame quarterback position.
Yeah. It's weird. I would actually, and this might be unpopular as well, at least based on what I've seen. I think a lot of people in the comments want them to go to Pine just because he can kind of do a little bit of both. I'm almost the exact opposite of you, and not in a bad way. I would make Buckner the starter. I think he proved enough tonight that I think you roll with the young guy, get him the experience that he needs, because next year you're playing Ohio State and Clemson. And I know you don't really want to necessarily look to next year. But you open up the season, I think, at Ohio State, if I'm not wrong. And then you have Clemson at home, I believe. And you're not winning those two games, in my opinion. I mean, I know Buckner has shown some savvy. He's already shown that he can be a playmaker, even with the lack of quarterback experience that he even was able to, have at the high school level. So, maybe I'm dead wrong here. But I think any opportunity you can have to get your best, at least future playmaker, the ball, and give him every opportunity to make plays and learn the offense on the fly, and look probably pretty good doing it. I think you do that. And then I think you maybe sprinkle in a little bit of Jack Cohen. I think this could almost be an Everett Golson, Tommy Rees sort of situation in 2012, where this offense can kind of get things rolling if you do it that way, where Golson's the guy. In this case, Buckner's Golson. And then if you need that 2-minute drive like today, and obviously I think Buckner was hurt, and that might have played a role in that, of course. But Reese showed a lot of poise in 2012 to kind of be the guy in clutch moments. And I think Cone has shown, when you're going to give him the 2-minute drill and you're going to let him get the ball out quick and run plays where you're going to essentially have to get the ball out quick, he can make some plays for you. And he's shown that in the past. I mean, he was a really good, I mean, he was I wouldn't say really good, but he was a solid quarterback at Wisconsin, and he led them to some big games and was able to produce in big moments. So I absolutely think he could be that Tommy Rees level player for you, and maybe even better. I mean, I think Jack Cohn, at least from a talent standpoint, is probably better than his offensive coordinator right now was. So that's what I would do. And I'm starting to think that this was something that was somewhat planned going into the bye week anyway. Not necessarily sprinkling in Cohen per se, but definitely transitioning into Buckner being the guy. And that's what I would do. And I'm in agreement with you on pretty much 100%. I mean, I don't want to say this is the last time that Notre Dame ever sees Pine play for him. You know, injuries happen. You know, if they want to roll with this Buckner Cohen situation and Cohen gets hurt or something like that, then you can roll with Buckner Pine. And I think it's actually might be a better offense from that standpoint, just because Pine can make some plays with his legs as well. But I think this is really today's game was the staff saying we're committing to Buckner specifically for the future, and we're not looking past that. And that's really what the tone I got from today's game.
Yeah. I think, you kind of hit the nail on the head. I mean, at the very least, okay, I look at it this way. All right. How much more satisfaction do I get as a fan from going 11-1 and playing in a New Year's Six bowl than going 10-2, maybe just missing a New Year's Six bowl, playing on December 29th or whatever the situation is? Like, for the big picture part of this program, does it really matter? I mean, certainly from, if you've got, your banner in your locker room and you're trying to check off like this year we got here and we made incremental steps, so on and so forth. Yeah. I mean, I get that from a program standing point, I guess. But at the same time, really, I don't believe necessarily that, I think the Notre Dame coaching staff went into this year. It's like, we're going to try. I mean, I said it a couple minutes ago. We're going to try to win every game. It's not like we're just going to throw our hands in the air and be like, all right, we're just going to throw Buckner to the Wolves, week 1 at Florida State and then, whatever, you know what I mean? So there's a little bit of give and take to this, but I do genuinely think that this was we're using this as an opportunity to put our best foot forward next season. I mean, if you're looking at, who Notre Dame loses and the guys that they're bringing in and the guys that they're getting experience, it really seems like Notre Dame's playing for next season. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm not saying that they've mailed it in. Say that again.
At least to an extent.
Yeah, I mean, they're throwing Deion Colsey in a little bit more. They played more true freshmen. Joe Alt, true freshman, played the whole game at left tackle. They're going to get Blake Fisher back at some point. I expect him to play the last couple weeks of the season. So they're not losing a ton on this team. I mean, Kyle Hamilton's the big one, obviously. I'm sure he's gone. I mean, if you can convince him, since name, image, and likeness, hey, buddy, you're still going to make money at Notre Dame, just stay here. I mean, I don't know, try, but I don't see it happening. But other than that, I mean, what other big names are they losing? Avery Davis. I mean, there are some guys that are, Kyron Williams probably moves on, but for the most part, a lot of their main pieces will be back. And I genuinely think that Notre Dame has had circled, this next season as one where obviously they're playing Ohio State, they're playing Clemson. You split in those two games and win out the rest, and you're probably looking at a college football playoff berth. So I don't know. You get Buckner the reps, you get him a full spring. He's no longer, at this time next year, he's no longer coming off not actually playing because of COVID and all the weird stuff. So yeah, I don't know. And Somebody mentioned Rocco Spindler. I mean, he's probably one of the next guys in at one of those guard positions. Zeke Carell has gotten experience. Hopefully he moves to center and he has more success there, as you've mentioned on other podcasts, which is a good point. That's more of his natural position. So you're trying to make things, and this is where Notre Dame is as a program in general. They're not going to compete for a college football playoff every year, but you try to build your program in a way that the stars align every 2 or 3 years, so that you can compete for a college football playoff and a national championship at some point. I feel like that's what Notre Dame's doing.
Yeah, that's where they're at as a program. I mean, anybody that thinks they're going to go 12-0 every year and win a national championship per se, I mean, I think that's a little bit too much fanboying there, or too much optimism. It's like you said. I mean, they're a program that, we already mentioned this a little bit earlier ago. They have a floor, and I think their floor is a top, 7 or 8 team in the country most years, to be completely honest, at least from an overall program standpoint. I don't think it's really much of an argument that they're at the very, very minimum a top 10 program right now. And you go 10-2, you go 11-1, and then maybe that 1 year, like Buckner's a junior or senior, and boom, you're competing for a national championship. You go 12-0, you beat Ohio State, you beat Clemson, or like you said, you split with those teams, whatever, and you have a real opportunity to maybe do something there. But I mean, and I know we've used this phrase maybe too many times, hitting the nail on the head. But I agree a lot with what you said, and I think it was actually something you said previously. Buckner's gonna make mistakes. He's a freshman. He lacks a little bit of experience, so he's kind of raw, but at the same time, he actually shows a lot of moxie and poise. And I think for being as raw as he is, he's actually kind of developed to an extent, if that makes any sense to people. But I think it goes back to what you said. I mean, that first interception, that was the pick six. It was a true freshman throwing the ball to a true freshman. I thought live it looked like Deanne Colsey just kind of got beat out of his route by the corner. I think the corner made a really, really good, like, just move, like a solid veteran move on him, and Buckner threw to where Colsey was supposed to be, and he wasn't there. Looking at that front live, I thought that was the case. But then you see kind of Kelly yelling at him on the sideline, and who knows? Maybe it was a misread by Buckner, and he was supposed to get that receiver in a different place. I don't know. And that's something we'll probably never know overall. But that's what it looked like. I said, that's what it looked like live. And then the second one, and I tweeted this out right when it happened. I don't want to blame the refs, but a bad call by the refs put them in a bad situation where in the second half they weren't really throwing the ball all that effectively. And all of a sudden your true freshman quarterback's in 3rd and 23 when he should have been in an opportunity to possibly put them in decent field goal range. And he has to make sort of a desperation play, and he barely overthrows his wide receiver. And if he doesn't overthrow him, no one's talking about him. And I know, like, that's neither here or there at this point. But those are 2 plays right there where I can live with knowing what he was able to do on a lot of his other drives, specifically. And I think he's only going to get better as a passer. And I think that's why you got to continue to play him on a weekly basis, and not just as a gadget player, which is what they were doing early on in the season. They have to play him like they were today. When he gets in there, whether or not he's going to be the only quarterback playing, if it's going to be him and Cone, that's fine. But you have to have Tyler Buckner throwing the football. And part of the reason, and then we can kind of wrap this up. We've been going for a little bit now. One of the reasons that gave me hope that Buckner's the guy moving forward, or at least not even hope, but just like a thought in my head that, okay, the coaching staff is moving in this direction, is that they did kind of expand the offense with him. And it looked like they were, when they pulled Cone from the game, they were like, Buckner, this is your game. We're not going back to him. It's not going to be this 2 QB system. You're the starter, at least for the rest of this game. Go win us a football game. He looked terrific the rest of that first half. And then, you're going to expect a good defense to make some adjustments. And I think that's what they did. They took away the throwing game a little bit. Buckner got maybe a little bit rattled here and there. You saw some of those plays, like the overthrow on the screen pass to Kyron Williams specifically. He kind of just did this little like, here you go kind of throw, and it went over his head.
Right.
Had the bad throw that probably should have been a pick to Avery Davis. But like I said, I can live with some of those because I think you keep giving him this experience, he's going to make some plays that neither Drew Pine or Jack Cohn can make.
Yeah. 3 really quick things. First of all, regardless of, and this is kind of what you were getting at, regardless of the outcome of this game, win or lose, Notre Dame got better for the future today. They're a better football team than when they started that game now, 5.5 hours ago. They just are.
Right.
And so, and it's always nice to get better and also win. Okay. So that's another big thing for me. I'll skip second of all. Third of all, finally, here's I'm trying to stay concise here, and I want to get this point out before we get
we just peaking viewers. Maybe we shouldn't be hopping off.
Oh, wow. Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, in that case, hi. Anyway, so I guess to sort of you mentioned about, we've talked about Notre Dame's floor. We've talked about where Notre Dame is as a program. I think, there's Notre Dame fans who obviously are pretty frustrated with where the current situation is. There's fans that are just think everything's great. There's people in between, all of that stuff. When I look at it, the big picture for me just boils down to how many other programs are actually in a genuinely better position than we are. Take Alabama out of it. Okay. Even Clemson this year, I mean, they've lost twice and even in wins haven't looked very good. So what other program right now today on, for me, it's October 10th. Who else would you rather be? What other program would you like? The phrase that like, if everybody threw their problems into the center of a circle, you'd probably just grab your own right back. I feel a lot like that as a Notre Dame fan because, obviously there's things we complain about, but I mean, aren't Penn State fans saying pretty much the same thing right now about, they obviously lost a big game because they don't have a second quarterback developed and all of that. And like, they can't win the big game and this and that and everything else. USC, one of our bigger rivals, dumpster fire for the most part. I mean, you'd probably take Alabama. You'd probably take Ohio State. Clemson
Georgia.
Most years, sure. Georgia right now, especially. Outside of that, are there a ton that you can definitively say, I would rather be this program? I mean, there's a few that you might say I would tie, but not, I don't want to be Iowa any more than I want to be a Notre Dame fan. Oklahoma was thrown out, but I think they have a lot of the same things as Notre Dame. So anyway, so really, I don't know. Like I say, I feel like, and I'll sort of end my ramble with this, is that it's not a bad place to be for Notre Dame right now to try to be playing to get to a spot where the stars align and then you can hit something bigger than you've hit in the past. And, and if it makes sense too, Brian Kelly he's nearing the end of his coaching career. And I think he's pretty well, he hasn't flat out said that, but I think he's mostly acknowledged that. I mean, I can't remember how much more he's got on his contract. Is it 3 more years? And I don't really think he coaches.
Secret extension in there somewhere.
Yeah, well, that's also that's also a good point. But I mean, he's 62 years old. I mean, he's not going to coach her, is the bottom line. And I think he ends his career at Notre Dame. I could eat my words on that, but regardless, and he's made the comments about I'm the winningest coach that never won a national championship. Well, what he's trying to do is in these last couple years, do things in a way that, maybe he's done a little bit differently. And he's coached however many years and he's aggregating all of that to try to make the stars align and to do something really special at a place like Notre Dame. And I feel like that's his end goal. And to be honest with you, I know I've been critical of Brian Kelly, but I think he's capable of that. I think that, I'm rooting for him to do that. And I think that that's a genuine possibility that over the next couple years that, with all the guys that they have coming in and Marcus Freeman they've brought in and who's a great recruiter and putting together hopefully another championship level defense, and then you bring the offense along, that's the end goal here. So I don't know. I'll leave it at that because I've done a lot of I mean, I guess we both have, but I've done a lot of rambling on this particular show. And in general, I'll say this, that I'm even though I'd like things to look a little prettier right now, and it would certainly not take as many years off my life if they were, I'm all right with where they are as long as what they do finally is translate some of this then into something maybe a little bit more special in the next couple of years.
And I think overall, to your point about Brian Kelly, I mean, at the very least, if he doesn't win a national championship at Notre Dame, which I'd still probably bet against him doing, he's going to the program's going to be in a way better place than when, for example, he took over. And Notre Dame's always going to be a high-profile job, so it doesn't matter if you're taking over when Brian Kelly did, where you kind of need to build the program back up, or when you're going to take over, for when Brian Kelly leaves, where the program's already, just in a really, really nice spot. You're gonna land probably a pretty big name guy, just in general. But you might want to be that big name guy that comes in when Notre Dame's kind of already rolling. And to your point, you've already seen it sort of with Marcus Freeman. He comes in, and Clark Lee was a terrific defensive coordinator. He might even be, just in general, like from like a scheme play calling standpoint, he might be a better defensive coordinator than Marcus Freeman. I'd probably actually say that, to be completely honest with you. But what Marcus Freeman has shown in his short time at Notre Dame is that he can recruit the hell out of the defensive side of the football. And so he's already showing a new level of a new level peak for Notre Dame that Clark Lee wasn't able to show. And so maybe you bring in, I don't know who the next coach is going to be. Maybe it's Marcus Freeman for all we know. But let's just say maybe you bring in like a Luke Fickell. Maybe he can show that there's a peak that Kelly wasn't able to reach, but because he's already in a very stable situation that Kelly was able to provide, you can get to that peak so much faster because you're already kind of close to it, if that makes sense. And that's really where I kind of agree with you and echo your thoughts on who would you rather be than Notre Dame. I mean, obviously you'd rather be Alabama. You'd rather probably be Clemson, Ohio State, specifically those three programs. And I might even throw in Georgia because I think Georgia recruits on the level of those three programs. They just haven't gotten over that hump per se. But other than that, I mean, it's like you said, there's kind of like this virtual tie between a lot of other programs. Oklahoma's sort of in the same shoes as Notre Dame. I mean, they've had the elite QBs and they still haven't been able to get over that hump. And as much as I love Caleb Williams, I mean, I think he's going to be a terrific player. I think he's already better than Spencer Rattler, and I would play him over Spencer Rattler from right now moving forward. They still have shown on a frequent basis that they can't stop anybody. So they're probably on par with Notre Dame to an extent because they can score against Alabama maybe better than Notre Dame can. LSU has proven that on like not a freak basis because they recruit at a very high level, but when the stars align for them, they get Joe Burrow, they get Joe Brady, they can win a national championship. So, I'd probably throw them in there with a tie as well, but they might fire Ed Orgeron this year for all we know. And then you have a few other programs here and there, but I really agree with what you said. I mean, I think Notre Dame has almost gone from being overrated to being underrated as a program overall. And it's games like this in years like this that I think show that they're 5-1, and yet people are talking about how they suck and how they play a crappy schedule and so on and so forth. But it's like, you go 10-2, 11-1 every year. Eventually, you can't really say a program sucks. They might not be Alabama, but who is? And I think that's probably a good place to kind of wrap this up because I think we're both in agreement there.
Yeah, I mean, you and I could kind of sit and go back and forth and, take a point and expand on it we could do this. I know Mark did a 24-hour show to start the college football season. We could do 24 hours on just Notre Dame football, I think. So, yeah, I don't know. I'll just leave it there.
We might have to answer this one actually, because this guy's been mentioning Tommy Rees a few times. Me and you, I think, agree on this, and then we'll wrap this up here soon. I promise you guys. I honestly like Tommy Rees. I think it's like you said, like you can always kind of nitpick some things here and there. As a fan of a team, you're always going to, be upset with your coaching staff at times, blah, blah, blah. But in reality, I don't think Rees has had the offense in his couple years as the OC to really show what he can do overall. And, last year, maybe last year you can argue. I think if you had a Tyler Buckner level player as a junior, so if you had Tyler Buckner in Ian Book's shoes last year, same player, 5th year senior, whatever, I absolutely think Tommy Rees's offense will look significantly better just in general. And then this year you're dealing with an offensive line that has struggled a lot. You're dealing with a statue quarterback at times, and you're dealing with a true freshman and a redshirt freshman quarterback playing for the first time in their college football careers. So I think a lot of that has to do. I'm not saying Tommy Rees is the next coming of Jesus Christ or Joe Brady for that matter. But I do think he's a much better offensive coordinator at the college football level than people want to give him credit for, or at least Notre Dame fans. I think he's actually pretty well respected outside of Notre Dame.
Yeah, I mean, Tommy Rees, I wouldn't want to be Tommy Rees right now, to be honest with you, because like you just said, I mean, bad offensive line, weird quarterback situation that's not really his fault. It's not really anybody's fault in particular, to be honest with you, but regardless, it's not his. I don't know. Like, he's fine. He's learning on the fly. I mean, it's his second year calling plays. I mean, he's at a place where he played and everybody knows who he is. He can't hide. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure there's a lot of offensive coordinators that can walk down the street at wherever they coach, and people are like, I think that guy might coach for the football team, but I don't know who he is. Tommy Rees is known by everybody at Notre Dame. Like, yeah. I mean, I don't know. So I don't know. Like, people always want to talk about, well, where's the creative play calling and this and that. And like, you don't know like what Tommy Rees has buried in the playbook that he just can't run yet because he doesn't have the right personnel, or he doesn't have he isn't comfortable with the personnel because they're inexperienced, or they're not real good at doing this fundamental thing yet. So you can't do some of the more special things that you want to do. I mean, so you don't know any of that stuff. So to me, I think Tommy Rees, like you said, is I mean, he started at Northwestern. He had great reviews as the quarterback coach at Northwestern. I believe he dabbled in the NFL for a year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
that's what I wanted to say. And so, he doesn't get to where he is by being dumb, by being just a terrible coach. I mean, I know it's easy. I just feel like it's easy for Notre Dame fans to pick on him because they know Tommy, he had the nickname of Turnover Tommy back in the day and all of that. I feel like a lot of the same people that hated him as a quarterback now hate him as the offensive coordinator. I think there's some of that too. Tommy Rees is just fine. I mean, Notre Dame's offense is going to be just fine once the personnel pieces, fall into the puzzle, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's weird. I'm like the exact opposite. I hated him as a player. But I knew how smart he was because you could tell, and you always heard kind of the stories about him getting into it with Kelly, because Kelly would be like, hey, like, why don't you do this? And he'd be like, oh, how about you go re-look at the playbook or something like that. And then, you just kind of knew.
And that's why he has the job now. Because
right, exactly.
I feel like Kelly respects that. That's why he's the coordinator now. But anyway, I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good. You're good. I mean, I just think it's one of those things where if Tommy Rees was the offensive coordinator for Alabama, just like hypothetically, maybe he'll never get that because you could argue like you have to have maybe some more experience, or you got to get to a certain level to get with Nick Saban, whatever it may be. I'm just saying, if you were to put Tommy Rees on as the Alabama offensive coordinator right now, I think he would be seen as an up and coming head coach. That's just my opinion. Maybe it doesn't work out. That doesn't always work out because I think Nick Saban, can make coaches look good. I mean, he seems to get the retreads all the time and gets them jobs. I mean, Steve Sarkisian's a good example of that. He's brought in so many he brought in Lane Kiffin. He's done so many things, and he's gave so many guys another opportunity because of it. And I just think he makes guys look really good. But I think that's to my point is that, and it's to your point as well. You put Tommy Rees with a set of weapons and a quarterback that, boom, they're national championship ready. People aren't maybe talking about Tommy Rees being this mediocre, I should say, offensive coordinator. And I think, it's not Obi-Wan Kenobi, but it's kind of a play on words here. But I think he's right. I mean, he's not necessarily saying he's a bad coach, but I just don't think he necessarily gets enough credit. I mean, I would say Tommy Rees, outside of Marcus Freeman, might be the best coach on the team. I mean, you can throw Mike Elston in there as well, I guess. But I don't think Notre Dame's hampered by Tommy Rees.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. I think we should probably wrap it up. Ben's probably a little tired. It's like you said, past midnight, his time. I'm going to the Bears-Raider game tomorrow, so I need to get some sleep before I tailgate the hell out of that game. We've been going an hour and 30 minutes strong, but I'm Nathan. You can find him at Real B Belden on Twitter. You can also follow his podcast, Under the Dome. Great podcast, has great guests on every week. You can follow my podcast at Golden Homers with my co-host Mason Plummer. We've been sort of in a hiatus the last couple of weeks, so I do apologize about that. I was traveling and visiting some family, and then Mason was traveling for work this week. So, but we have a lot to talk about. Like I said, we've been going an hour and 30 minutes strong, and I'm sure me and Ben will maybe do something similar on our podcast this week. But again, thanks for listening. You're listening to the Notre Dame post-game show on the Voice of College Football at Mark Rogers TV. Notre Dame, Virginia Tech post-game show. Notre Dame was able to pull out a victory today, 32-29. And we won't be here with you next week because there's no Notre Dame game. But we will be with you for the USC game, I believe on October 23rd. One of the biggest rivalries in college football, so it should be another good one. So thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you in a few weeks.